Marriage is a source of love and happiness for many, which is why the question of who can get married is so furiously contested today. But before we answer that question, we first have to ask what marriage is. That's the view anyway of Sharif Girgis, who along with Ryan T. Anderson and Robert P. George has authored the book What is Marriage? Man and Woman, A Defense. We invited Sharif into the studio to make his case about marriage, but also to discuss other matters like body self-dualism and contemporary belief in the West. Thank you for speaking with us, Sharif.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you argue that before we discuss whether marriage is about equality, as it's largely been cast in the push for same-sex marriage, we've got to first decide what marriage is. How do we do that?
Sure. Well, yeah, first a word about the reason for that. I think most people, when they say equality is being violated, they're assuming already a particular picture of what marriage is, and they're saying that that picture is being applied unequally. And they're basically assuming that it's a certain kind of intense emotional bond, that that's what sets it apart. And I think the way you can tell whether that's the right answer to what marriage is to judge it against other things we already believe about marriage. So most people think marriage is an inherently sexual relationship, that it requires a permanent and exclusive commitment to get off the ground. But I think those things, which people on both sides agree on, are much harder to explain if marriage is really an emotional bond. It's hard to see why marriage would be inherently a permanently committed relationship if what sets it apart is an emotion that might not be permanent. There's no reason that it should inherently be an exclusive relationship if an open relationship in some cases would foster more emotional closeness or stability. Same thing even for the idea that it's an inherently sexual relationship. If what really sets it apart is the degree or intensity of closeness, that this is your number one person, then sure, sexual activity can foster that, but so can other forms of activity, and it's hard to draw a principled line at romantic relationships. And once you start to see that, you realize that we've probably been assuming the wrong answer to the question of what marriage is, what really sets marriage apart. And then we can embark on the search for one that can make sense of all of those other norms.
So, am I right in saying that you say that marriage is a comprehensive bodily union? I'll ask you about that in a moment. A comprehensive bodily union between two people. It's permanent, it's exclusive, but you also talk about the role of children in that as well. Can you tell us how that fits into it?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think you can start with a general idea of what makes any kind of community or relationship, which is some kind of common action, right? It's activity towards common ends in the context of a commitment. And it's in each of those three ways that we think marriage is a comprehensive union. So it's a comprehensive unifying activity. It unites your heart, mind, and body in the marital act. And then it unites you with respect to a comprehensive range of goods, of common goals. It's not just teaming up together for the pursuit of knowledge, for the pursuit of art. It's really teaming up together for the pursuit of a whole wide range of domestic life, because it's oriented to the bearing and rearing of kids who need to be developed in every respect. And the way that you can tell which relationship is that in the union of a man and a woman, the very act that makes their marital love is also the kind of act that makes new life. So the marriage itself, the relationship embodied by that act, is going to be oriented to, it's going to be fulfilled or enriched or extended by family life. And then because it's comprehensive in those two senses, it's a one flesh union, as some religious traditions have put it, in the act that unites them, and quite literally one flesh in the fruit of that act. It's also should call for total commitment, which means permanence through time and exclusivity at each time.
We do live in a world where it's possible for people to have children not necessarily by bodily union. So if that's the case, and if same-sex couples want permanent, exclusive, monogamous, all those characteristics that you've described, then what grounds could there be for denying it to them?
Sure. Well, I think one thing to note is that in that kind of relationship, there isn't a connection between the kind of sexual activity that the couple has and this orientation of family life, right? So it's true that sexual activity between two people of the same sex or in fact between three people or among three people or more, may be sought to foster a kind of emotional connection, but you don't have a real union at all levels of the person. And we can say a little bit more about that. So what is it that makes bodily union? Most people think it has something to do with sexual activity. But it can't just be that it fosters a connection, because other activities do that. What makes bodily union between two people is the same thing as what makes bodily union within a person. So all the parts of me, my organs, my lungs, my heart, and so on, are one flesh because they're all actively coordinated towards a single end of the whole that they compose together, which is my bodily life. And that kind of relationship, that kind of union, bodily union, is possible between two people, but only in one respect. There's only one bodily end that it takes two people to coordinate towards, and that is the reproductive act. It's true that people can adopt, for example, but that's also true of two sisters who can adopt, or a group of three people who can adopt. And in some circumstances, there might be a special connection with the kid where that might make sense for some people. But it wouldn't make them a marriage. And the reason is that there wouldn't be an inherent connection between family life and the kind of union that the couple is realizing. And there would be a union of heart and minds as there are in other friendships, but not a union of heart, mind, and body as there is in the total union of marriage.
We haven't talked about marriage in these terms for, I don't know if we ever have. Is that part of the reason that this debate is so fractured? Because we haven't really spoken about what marriage is, and perhaps this is why you decided to write this book.
It is, yeah. Certainly in the last few decades, we haven't been thinking or speaking in these terms. What's remarkable is that this idea of marriage as a union of mind and body that would inherently be extended by, that kind of points toward family life, is something that's common not just to the Judeo-Christian tradition in the Genesis concept of one flesh union, but also to a lot of ancient Greek and Roman thinkers who had no connection with Judaism or Christianity, Socrates, Plato, Xenophanes, Musonius Rufus, Plutarch, a great Roman thinker. And so I think this is something that's deep in the Western tradition. But in the last few decades, way before same-sex relationships were in discussion, we've already, I think, increasingly been moving towards an idea of seeing marriage mainly as your number one emotional bond, which is, obviously emotion is an important connection within marriage, but it's not the sole foundation, I think. And so it is going to require a little bit of thinking outside the box and really re-examining the direction we've been on as a society for a while. And the main reason we might want to is that already for many decades, throughout much of the West, the norms that people still value in marriage, like permanence and exclusivity, have been in decline. And everybody recognizes that as a harm to society because of the stability that marriage provides for kids, and as a harm to spouses because total union, or in my language, comprehensive union, is something that people see the special value of.